the much anticipated bracket prediction for the 6th Invitational 2022. So just as a warning here, if you look back on this later on and it looks absolutely ridiculous, yeah, that's my bad. It's sort of just the nature of bracket predictions. There are some things that you can reasonably predict, but even getting something pretty small wrong early on might end up making your entire bracket look really, really weird. All of these matches here, we know both of the teams involved, and then these four and these four, we know one of the teams involved guaranteed. But other than that, it's entirely possible that by the time I get to any given position in the bracket that I will be predicting on teams that may or may not actually get to that point. So just a little bit of fair warning there. And all right, we're starting with Oxygen versus FaZe Clan. So FaZe is definitely the favorite here, the community favorite, I would say. Oxygen got off to a really good start in their group, but ended up falling off. They lost to MIBR and Team 1, as well as Damwon. They beat Na'Vi pretty decisively. That was the first one. So they lost to 2 LATAM teams, and here is now another LATAM opponent for them. Both of these teams back at the previous SI ended up placing 5th, 6th, I believe. So I don't think they actually played each other at that event, but they went out in the same placement position. And yeah, again, I think FaZe is the favorite here. They are the 3rd seed from their group versus Oxygen being the 2nd seed, but Oxygen's group outside of Damwon was sort of a mess, and FaZe was in what at this moment still seems to be the group of death. That might be reframed once we actually see how this bracket progresses. One of the other groups in hindsight might look like the strongest, but still at the moment it seems like it was that Liquid FaZe SSG group that was the strongest and most difficult to play in. So yeah, I'm rocking with FaZe for this one. That puts OXG into the lower bracket. And Ninjas in Pajamas versus TSM. So I think this is one of the hard ones to predict in the first round, along with Elevate Sonics. I think the other two are a little bit easier, and we'll see if that actually rings true once the games play out. But I really wanted to say Ninjas. My gut said Ninjas, but then for some reason, I don't know, my heart, or however you want to call it, something was pulling me towards picking TSM, and I don't even think it's just because they're NA. I'm not even especially big of a TSM fan, but if I had to choose a region to win the event, it would of course be NA. But all right, I don't know, just something made me pick TSM here, so we're rocking with it. It could go either way. Both of these teams placed really well at the last SI, of course, with Ninjas winning the thing. TSM ended up in 4th, and after that, well, TSM definitely fell off in terms of results. One of those events they couldn't really help, and the other one they just barely missed out on, whereas Ninjas got 9th through 12th at Mexico and 2nd place at Sweden. So definitely a lot better results than TSM throughout the year, but I'm especially taking into consideration how the groups went, and both of them were definitely really shaky, and I just feel like Ninjas feel a little bit more inconsistent for me, and for some reason I think TSM's gonna boss up. We're gonna rock with it. Space Station versus Na'Vi. This is the other one that I feel is easy to predict, and probably the easiest to predict. I think this will be the most heavily in favor of Space Station in terms of predictions. And if my understanding of the bracket is correct, then Space Station picked Na'Vi. All of these 2nd seeds get to select their opponents from any of the 3rd seeds except for from their own group, and of course they pick in order of who did the best. So Space Station was the best 2nd seed. They had the most points, so I believe they picked first. And then Ninjas and Elevate had the same number of points, so I don't know who picked first out of them. And then Oxygen is a 2nd seed, so they should have gotten to pick, but the way it pans out is since they had the fewest number of points and somebody has to end up playing somebody else, they just get the last one remaining. They don't technically get to pick. So they miss out on a little bit of that benefit of being a 2nd seed. And they have to end up playing the least desirable opponent from the 3rd seeds, which I would say was FaZe Clan. So, right, Space Station versus Na'Vi. Once again, I think, yeah, I'm just going to go with Space Station here. They look pretty good. Na'Vi had their moments, 2-0'd MIBR, took a map off Damwon, but they've looked questionable at other times. And Space Station, not completely dominant, but outside of their Liquid loss, they looked pretty solid. Well, maybe not even shaky at times. Almost lost to FaZe. The Cyclops first map got really close to being a blowout, and but still, they won all of those matches other than the Liquid one. So SSG moves on, and Na'Vi falls. Elevate versus Sonics, another tough one to call, and a lot of this has to do with my lack of knowledge on Elevate. They definitely surprised, and they seem like NA killers thus far. They beat Dark Zero and TSM They were in the group that had 2 NA teams, and they defeated both of them, so maybe Sonics should be on red alert for them. We'll have to see what happens. I think that either of them could surprise the other one. Sonics does have the weapon of mass destruction known as Grixter, and he is fully activated in this tournament, it would seem, so he might make mincemeat of Elevate, or maybe Elevate will just fly under Sonic's radar and get things done. We'll have to see. But I did pick Sonics here. I've liked the way Sonics have played for the most part. They did get off to a bit of a slow. Well, no, they started hot in their first game, but they couldn't close it out. They really struggled to do so, and they in fact failed to do so. They almost won a solid 2-0 against Empire. They ended up losing that 2-1. And had they won that, they would have topped their group, but instead they ended up here in 3rd place. I think they have potential to go far in this tournament, and I think that'll start with a victory over Elevate, I should say. All right, next up, FaZe versus Team Liquid. This is a rematch from the group stage. Not too much to say here. Liquid didn't destroy FaZe, but it was a decisive result, and I don't really have any reason to think that it would go otherwise the second time around, so I'm just gonna go with Liquid, and we'll move on from it. Oh yeah, I forgot to put Elevate down there. So Liquid here, and FaZe falls down. Let me just say about this. The way this bracket works is that for this first round, the teams just go to the position you'd expect them to go. So this first one goes to this first one here, and then second, so on and so forth. And this one also behaves predictably. The top one here goes to the top one here, and the bottom goes to the bottom. But this one is inverted. The top goes to the bottom, and it sort of functions as a mirror image. And this is to avoid rematches. You sort of have to every other round invert where people fall in the loser's bracket. Otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of rematches. Say if FaZe fell down here, then if Oxygen win this game, it would just be a FaZe Oxygen rematch again. They just played an upper bracket, and they play again in lower bracket, so you have to do this inversion. Anyways, just a little bit of bracketology. Okay, so what do I have next? TSM versus Furia. This is another rematch from the group stage. TSM took this 2-0, and of all of the NA teams that fought against LATAM teams of the group, this was the most handy victory for an NA team. The only other one that won, I think, was SSG, and that was super close against FaZe, but they lost against Liquid, and then Sonics lost against NiP. That was fairly close, but it was a 2-0, both overtime maps, and then Oxygen lost to both MIBR and Team 1, and then Furia beat Dark Zero also in this group. So TSM was the only one that took a clean 2-0 over any LATAM team of all of the NA teams. And I think they can do it again. For one reason or another, TSM their playstyle seems to line up pretty well against the LATAM teams, and well, Furia in particular based on that 2-0. So I have them moving on, and Furia falls down here. Okay. SSG versus Empire. This is a rematch from both Sweden and Mexico's first, so we'll talk about it first. They played each other in the quarterfinals of bracket. Empire eliminated SSG 2-0. I don't remember the first map, but the second one was Clubhouse, and SSG are solid on Clubhouse now. At the time, they were a bit shaky. Way back in the day, it was their famous map, and Empire seems to be, these days, one of the strongest Clubhouse teams. So if this match does happen and they play on that map, I'll definitely be excited to watch that one. I do give to SSG here, and part of the reason is, although Empire did top their group, their gameplay and their energy, something about it, they just seem really sleepy to me. I don't know if that's an artifact of having only 3 of their players in the play area, so 2 of their players are playing isolated, and I don't know if that'll not be the case once we go into bracket. I don't know if they'll be cleared to play, but if it is, I'm sure it'll help them some amount. It doesn't seem like they've needed it, but in that game versus Sonics, it seemed more like a Sonics choke than an Empire boss up, but Empire has had big moments, also some questionable moments. They lost versus Eminem pretty handily, and Empire, NiP, and Eminem have a little triangle effect going on, little rock, paper, scissors. Eminem beat Empire pretty easily, Empire beat NiP pretty easily, and NiP beat Eminem pretty easily. All of them were 2-0s, and the losing team in each of the matchups only got 6 or 7 rounds over the course of the 2 maps. So I don't know what the deal with that is. I mean, it could be that Eminem really did suffer from playing at 10 a.m. The same thing happened when they played Sonics. They got picked apart fairly well. So yeah, maybe they really just do fall to pieces playing at 10 a.m. I also think it could have to do with the fact that Eminem doesn't really have international experience. So playing against NIP, they're just sort of a fish out of water, so they didn't do well. But playing versus Empire, a team from their region that I imagine maybe they've played before, maybe they've scrimmed before, but even if they haven't, they should be more familiar with their European playstyle. So they had that figured out, and then I don't really know how to account for the rest of the triangle. But there's some factors that I suspect might be the reason why, but it's weird that it's like such a heavy rock, paper, scissors effect. Anyways, all of that aside, I just think there's like a few oddities with Empire, and SSG's weaknesses have definitely been there, and they lost to Liquid pretty decisively, and they had their scares a little bit versus Rogue, and then also a little bit versus Cyclops, and then I suppose also even versus FaZe, but they did manage to win versus all of them, and I think that their trajectory has been an upward one throughout the groups. They've clutched up, their players have tightened up the whole team, all this stuff. So I'll give it to SSG. Empire falls to the lower bracket. Sonics versus Damwon Kia. I want to give it to Sonics, just one of my favorite teams, but Damwon looks nigh unstoppable at the moment, and they are on an absolute collision course with Liquid, as I'm sure anyone else who has done a bracket is well aware. So I do indeed have Damwon moving on, Sonics falling to the lower bracket, and I do have a little bit of a run in store for Sonics, though. We'll see what happens with them. Yeah, Damwon just looks super solid, and Sonics didn't look weak by any means, but they were shakier than the unshakable Damwon Kia, so I think it's an obvious pick there. But if this is one of the matchups that I want to see, that I want to watch the most, and it's not even that unlikely, Sonics only have to win their first match to make this happen. All right, so now we are going to move on to the lower bracket for a little bit. Oxygen versus Eminem. Eminem, I think, is one of the teams that I'm potentially underrating the most in this bracket, but I do believe this is also a 10 a.m. game. So if this pattern rings true, where they got destroyed in their other 10 a.m. games, they might get destroyed in this one as well. And I do think Oxygen has potential to do well here. They did very well at the last SI. They were one of the top performing non-LATAM teams. In fact, the second best performing non-LATAM team. And Eminem, I mean, I just think they're maybe out of their element a little bit here. They've had games where they got crushed, including a game against, Sonics, the country mates of Oxygen. So maybe Eminem can surprise here, but I think I'm rocking with Oxygen. I think it's a safe-ish pick. At least I don't think it's a ridiculous one, and more likely for it to happen than not. MIBR versus NIP. This is a tough one to call. These teams have fought each other numerous times, being from the same region, and then they also met in the winners finals, I believe, of the last SI, which NIP took, and also, if I remember correctly, I think it was the last round of the last map, round 15, map 3, and NIP ended up taking it, and I think it's entirely possible that if MIBR had taken that round, that they would have won the 6th Invitational. And, well, I guess if they had won it, they would have got at least second rather than the third they ended up getting. They lost that, and then they went on to fight Liquid, which they lost pretty badly, which was weird because they had fought Liquid earlier in the bracket and beat them. So a little bit of a reversal there. And then they might have even played in groups. I can't recall who was in which group as far as NIP, MIBR, and Liquid go. And so I'm going to go with NIP here. I think they've looked a little bit better than MIBR, and if we ignore that the sandbox loss for NIP especially, MIBR did beat Team 1, so their fellow LATAM team, and they also beat Oxygen. And NIP had some weird stuff going on where they lost the sandbox, and they lost pretty badly to Empire, but they did beat Sonics 2-0, again a narrow 2-0, and then they beat Eminem as well. So I think it is really, really tough to call just based on the group's results, and I don't know, I'm just picking NIP because they've just been the more successful team, and maybe they looked a little bit better in groups, and I mean, I guess based on the system that we have and whatever, MIBR was, of course, a 4th seed, and NIP was a 2nd seed, so yeah, I'm going with NIP here, I guess, but that's one of the ones I felt the weirdest making, but I would have felt weird making either prediction, I think, so we're going with that. Na'Vi versus Dark Zero. So, man, I don't have very much faith in Europe, as you'll see in the results, and then just really in general. Again, like I said, I might be underrating Eminem, and I think Na'Vi might surprise as well. They had some surprises in store, defeating MIBR, and they also took a map off of Damwon. They did get destroyed by Oxygen, and it was fairly close against Team 1. So their performance in the tournament massively improved after that first series against Oxygen, but So did Dark Zeros, and I have a little bit more confidence in them. They've made more appearances throughout the year, even though their roster has changed. Dark Zero has. Back at the last SI, it was NJR, Eclipse, and Hyper who are still on the roster, but now they have Pambazoo and Canadian, and Canadian being the most important piece because that's your whole structure and IGL and whatever switched over. Used to be Mint, and Mint is still on the team, just not on the playing team. He's one of the coaches. And yeah, I don't know, maybe I should pick Na'Vi here. I don't feel especially bad picking Dark Zero, but I do think this one could potentially go either way. Dark Zero on a little bit of an upwards trajectory after the way they started out with that pretty bad loss to Elevate, and then they ended up losing to... They lost to Furia in their last game. I think the game before that it was a win against TSM, and I'm sort of blanking on what their other game was, but it was a victory, wasn't it? Oh yeah, right. It was against BDS, and it was a victory. Very close, and almost undeserved, it looked like. I sort of forgot about BDS. Maybe I just deleted it from my memory banks. But okay, yeah, I am going with Dark Zero, and that's Na'Vi out of the tournament, and that leaves only Empire as the sole representative of Europe, I think, in my bracket at the moment. Elevate versus Rogue. I had Rogue initially, and then I changed my mind and went with Elevate. These are two of the teams that I'm less familiar with. Elevate more so. I've seen some Rogue, but I just don't watch that much APAC gameplay. And Elevate least of all because they were not at any of the other majors. Unlike Damwon, which I guess is the only other APAC team in the bracket at the moment. So yeah, I went with Elevate. They definitely performed better in their group than Rogue did in their group, but I mean, you might also argue that Rogue had a much tougher group than Elevate did. And well, Elevate they didn't get to play BDS when they were weakened. That was the very last match, I think, for BDS, and that was when BDS seemed to be at their strongest as far as their games went. Of course, the first two games they had their coach, and the last two games they didn't, and so they played them in the second game that they actually had their full roster, so they had time to get warmed up. And so Elevate might have even looked more impressive in their group stage if they had fought a BDS that was as weakened as the BDS that the other teams in their group fought. Okay, so that I think was pretty complicated to explain, but I do have Elevate moving on. I think that's a tough one to call, and maybe if you're more knowledgeable on the subject, it's not that tough, but I'm gonna go with Elevate based on what I saw in the group stages. Okay, now Oxygen versus Sonics. This is a rematch from the NAL Finals semifinals. So of course there was an initial round before the actual finals matchup in it. So these semifinals, Sonics took that one, and over the course of all three stages, they played 3 best of 1s, of course, and I can't remember who came out on top each time. I want to say it was Oxygen, Sonics, Oxygen, but I think the Sonics win in stage 2 was the most decisive win, and their round counts were pretty similar, but I don't think anyone had like a big leg up over the other one, except for in that best of 3 game that they played in the NAL finals. Sonics did beat Oxygen at very, very close, if I remember right. I think it was round 15, one for each of them, and then Sonics won by like 7-4 or something. So really close. It could have gone either way in the first 2 maps, and then just a Sonics win. So all right, for that reason, I'm gonna go with Sonics, and also I think they've looked a bit better in the tournament thus far. So next up is NIP versus Empire, and these have been 2 of the best performing teams internationally throughout the year. Ninjas Pajamas won SI, and Empire got 7th, 8th at that tournament. And then at Sweden, NIP underperformed. They got 9th, 12th in their group. Empire got 2nd at that event. And then, or sorry, no, that was Mexico. And then at Sweden, NIP got 2nd, and Empire got 9th, 12th in their group. So mirrored results at the 2 majors, and then NIP did a decent bit better than Empire did at SI, but Empire still put in a respectable performance. And you could also say that NIP's better performance at one of the majors was more recent than Empire's, so that's good for them. Empire was in the group of death at Sweden, and as you can see here, 3 of the teams from that group ended up being first seeds. That's Furia, Empire, and Damwon, and then Space Station was 2nd seed. So even more so in hindsight, it seems like that really was the group of death. So Empire just barely went out there. But I don't know. I described Empire as looking sleepy thus far, but I think NIP was as well. And these 2 teams did come from the same group. Empire ending up on the top of the group, and a big reason for that was because Empire did 2-0 Nip. It looked pretty easy for them. I don't know what the deal with it was. Maybe it just was a sleepy day for Nip, and Empire were awake on that day. But especially off the back of that 2-0, I'm going to give this one to Empire. So I think they can do it again, considering how handily they beat them the first time. DZ versus Furia, yet another rematch. We just saw this in groups, and we also saw it at the last SI. They played in groups, and I think DZ won at like 7-3 in the best of one, but then when they played in bracket, they beat, Furia beat DZ, that is. They beat them, it was like 8-6, and then a 7-2 or a 7-3, something like that, so a 2-0, and they knocked them out of bracket, knocked DZ into, I think they ended up in 13th through 16th place, so equivalent to going out in this round, and then Furia went out in this round, I think, to, I don't know, whoever it was. But anyways, can DZ win this one? Is it third time lucky? They lost to them last SI. They lost to this SI, I guess, already in groups. And then now they're playing them in bracket for elimination if this is where they actually meet. Of course, Dark Zero can't meet them in the upper bracket because Dark Zero starts down here in the lower bracket. Based on trajectories, it seems like it'd be a Dark Zero victory. They lost 2-0 pretty badly the first time in the last SI, and then in this bracket it was really, really close, and so based on that, the improvement of Dark Zero over time, maybe they'll take down Furia, or maybe Furia will just keep the streak alive, make it 3 in a row on Dark Zero, and that's the one I went with. I don't know if one's that much more likely than the other, especially considering the really close result just happened, but I think Furia are a scrappy enough team, they're going to end up pulling this win out in the rematch. That's just how I felt about it. Elevate versus FaZe. I mean, I gave Elevate the nod back here, and I can't let them go any further. I mean, I guess I could. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh. I did give them a loss and then a win, and now another loss. But FaZe is super solid. We can't ignore the fact that they are, in fact, the reigning major champions. Not the world champions, but they have won the most recent event coming into this event. So I'm going to give them the nod here. I think FaZe will take them down if they do end up playing, but I think Elevate will probably put on a bit of a show. So, all right. And we're going to do one more round of the losers bracket before we go back to the upper bracket. Sonics versus Empire. This is another rematch from this is group A, right? Sonics did lose to Empire the first time they played. This was the very first match that either of these teams played. The first match of the tournament, along with whatever the tandem stream match was. And yeah, Sonics could have won this one 2-0. They sort of let it slip away from them. They won the first map, and then the second map they had in their grasp. I think they were up 6-3, right? I hope I'm not confusing this match for another one. But they did let it slip away from them. They ended up losing in, I think, round 15, and then they lost the next map. So Empire took it 2-1, but Sonics probably should have taken it, and had that match not been played on the first day, I think that Sonics wouldn't have let the nerves or whatever it was cause them to choke, and I think they'll get it in the rematch. Again, maybe too high of hopes for Sonics, but I mean, until proven otherwise, my hopes will remain high. I give it to Sonics there, and then Furia versus FaZe. I'm going with FaZe here. Furia has been good, and maybe eventually they will rise to the top, but they have been overshadowed by a lot of their LATAM compatriots over the last year and whatever, and FaZe was certainly one of them, and I think they will continue to do so. FaZe overshadowing Furia, that is. I think FaZe takes this matchup if this does end up going down. All right, back to the upper bracket. Liquid versus TSM. So, I mean, I was praising Liquid and Damwon quite a lot, and, well, Liquid is going to continue on. I sort of mentioned that I even put TSM here, just not terribly confidently after the Nip thing. I think if they do fight Furia, they win, but again, wasn't super confident on this one. But Liquid, it's hard to not have confidence in them. It looks like this is their tournament to win finally, and well, we'll see if that's really the case, but I give them the nod over TSM. Moving on to Space Station versus Damwon. As much as I want Space Station to win, as much as I'd love to see these guys go all the way and get another world championship under their belt, first for Hot and Cold, but I think second or third for everyone else on the roster, with Bosco having 2 and Foltz, Rampy, and Skies having 1 apiece. If you're including the Xbox SI, of course, from the first year. Anyways, yeah, I think Damwon will take it, but if this matchup does end up happening, I think SSG has a real shot. We'll have to see if SSG remains clutch as they've been throughout the tournament, or if they fall apart here, but Damwon will certainly put them to the test, and Damn. Oh yeah, and I forgot to put TSM down here. And yeah, I'm gonna give the nod to Damwon. I think at this point this looks pretty similar to a lot of people's brackets, but maybe a few deviations. And then that puts SSG down here. All right, Liquid versus Damwon, and here we have them meeting in the winter finals, as most people have them projected to do, as their seeding would suggest that they would. Identical, just about results in the group stage. They each went 8-1 in terms of maps, putting them on 11 out of 12 possible points. They were both plus 20 something on round count. Damwon's was like 2 higher, whatever it was. So they both looked just about equally dominant. And then I again have to give a little bit of a nod to Liquid for having the tougher group. I would say going into it, some people assessed Damwon's group as a group of death. And after having seen it, I'm not sure about it. We'll see how those teams fare in the bracket, but it looked a bit messy, and it looked like a bit steeper competition in Liquid's group. Yeah, Liquid, the Palu Nesk duo just looks so unbeatable, especially Nesk. How is this guy reaching his prime after having played this game at the top level for like 6 years? It's actually incredible. Can Nesk and Palu carry them to the victory with, the core of what PSK ask in resets backing them up? We'll see. I do think that they take it over Damwon, and unfortunately this is cut off a little bit. This is sort of just the price I had to pay for zooming in, so it's, so that it's not, so everything's not so tiny, but you get the idea. It's Liquid over here. And then we're going back to the loser bracket. Sonics versus TSM, another NA matchup, just like the Oxygen and Sonics we saw back over here. Sonics have performed pretty similar to TSM over the course of all 3 stages in terms of points. No, that's not true. I think if you like tiered things, it's SSG's on top because of how dominant they were in stage 2 and 3. They've got so many points, and then it's Oxygen and Sonics like 10 points below them, and they're maybe on the same number of points, and then it's TSM and Dark Zero like a notch below them. TSM got, if I remember, I think it was 5th place in stage 1, 2nd place in stage 2, and 5th place again in stage 3, whereas Sonics got no worse than 3rd in any stage. They got 2nd, 3rd, yeah. People always like to talk about the Sonics always being in top 4, but that's not even giving them full credit. They were always top 3, top 4 just being the important thing, because that's who you send to the majors and the finals and all this stuff. I think Sonics have just looked more impressive over the course of the entire year, including in every regard just about, except for at SI, which Sonics weren't at the last SI, but Sonics did make it to both the majors. They got grouped both times, but TSM only made it to 1 major and got grouped. That was not with their full roster, but still. And then more impressive regional results. Sonics ended up as the NAL finals winner. TSM wasn't even at the NAL finals, which was a bit controversial, but yeah, I do give the nod to Sonics here, and all of that taken into account, plus the fact that TSM did look a little bit shaky in their group, and so did Sonics, but maybe just a little bit less so. I give it to Sonics. FaZe versus SSG, another rematch from Group B, and FaZe lost the first time, but just very narrowly, just came down to that one last round. Can Space Station do it again? I think so. I've liked the trajectory that they've taken a little bit more than FaZe. SSG has certainly been tested a bit more, I guess. They both lost pretty similarly badly to Liquid, I think, but didn't Space Station take them to overtime on at least the first map? I'm not 100% sure, but I've liked SSG's play just a little bit more, and that, also does have to do with the fact that they did beat FaZe, because had FaZe won, then they would have ended up higher seed based off of point tie and tiebreaker, and okay. I think this one is close to call. Maybe not too close to call, though, because I'm going to go with SSG. I'm going to let my bias sink through, but, you got to pick one. And that leaves Sonics versus SSG. Finally, another NA matchup, and this was not played at the NAL finals. They were on the other side of the bracket from each other. SSG lost their match, Sonics won their match, taking them to the very final game against Dark Zero, which Sonics do end up winning. So SSG got like 3rd/4th, and Sonics got 1st. So by that metric, I guess Sonics ended up being the top team in NA, but just looking at regional dominance, SSG was the undisputed king within stage 2 and 3, not so much in stage 1, but that was when they were having some roster struggles. And then they also had the best international performance at the 2 majors. They made it out of groups both times, and the only other NA team to make it out of groups even one time was Dark Zero. And all right, so there are factors going for either of them. The last time that they met, I think it was a Sonics win though, right? And that was in a best of 1, and that was a 7-5 on Coastline, I think. And I do think that both of these teams have improved since then. It's very hard to call, but I guess just based on stature, based on this and that, I don't know, just based on so many factors, and just based on the structure of my heart, I'm going with SSG there. That could go either way. If this ends up happening all the way here in losers semis, that's gonna be crazy. I'm gonna love to see that. But I'll give the nod to Sonics there. Damwon versus Space Station, a rematch of this of this winners semis match. And will this be enough time for SSG to turn around and reflect on what happened with Damwon? Maybe. SSG does have a very good support staff, but I'm still gonna give the nod to Damwon. If I was making all these predictions day by day, like if I only predicted on like these 4, and then once we saw these 4, predict on the next one, so on and so forth. If I did it like that, things might be different, but because I lack all the information from all these other games in this bracket and I'm just doing it fresh from the beginning, I guess I still have to give the nod to Damwon because they looked so good in groups. And maybe by the time we get deep into bracket, if both these teams are in, then maybe Space Station will look better. But for the time being, yeah, it's just going to be a Liquid Damwon rematch in the grand final. And once again, it's cut off, but this is Liquid versus Damwon. And I should also mention Liquid versus Damwon is not just a rematch from my fantasy bracket right here, but these two teams did meet each other in the Mexico bracket. They met in quarterfinals where Liquid won. It was an overtime map on the first one, and then it was like a 7-1 or something. They ran away with it on the second one. So maybe Damwon could have won that series if they'd won the first map, still got destroyed on the second one. Maybe the third map they could have won, who's to really say. And also, if we're just looking at like power levels, even back then, because Liquid in that next round that they advanced to the semifinals, they lost to Team 1, who was the eventual tournament winners. So if Team 1 beat Liquid, the tournament winners, and then Liquid beat Damwon, maybe Damwon was just the third strongest team at that tournament at that point in bracket. But that's a little bit really hard to call. But then also at the next major, at the Sweden major, we didn't see Liquid, but we did see Damwon go to the semifinals, and they played against FaZe, and they were 1 round away from beating them, and then going to the grand final and, well, potentially winning. They would have had to beat Ninjas, but they could have very well done it, seeing as though they just beat the team that did end up actually beating Ninjas in FaZe. So, right, Liquid versus Damwon. If this does end up happening, it'll be a great final to watch. I'm sure this will be a very anticipated one in terms of excitement and also in terms of just like people projecting this to actually happen in bracket. Based on seeding, this is probably what should happen based on the results of group stage. And if people are following their heart, maybe that as well. This could very well be anyone else in the grand finals. Like there's just a whole lot of teams and they've all shown that they can compete. Everyone's taken games, maps, rounds, whatever off everyone else. And it could be anyone in that grand final. And if we're just talking purely statistically, of course, it's very likely to not just be Liquid versus Damwon, but because they have looked the best, I'll put them there. But who's gonna take it? Liquid will not be getting, or whoever ends up being in the winner position, will not be getting a map advantage this time around, and that was part of the reason I think that Liquid did not win the previous SI. They might have won it had that not been the case. They came from the loser side, and so Ninjas in Pajamas had a free map against them, and so they never went to an actual map 5 because Ninjas had it already won for them by coming from the winners bracket. And right, that won't be the case this time. It'll just be a map pick advantage of some sort, and so it's going to be a crazy grand final, but I do think that Liquid pull it out. I like their team a bit more. I think that they have the longevity. I think that they have the power, the structure, all the things necessary to win. I think it's about time that Nesk and Palu get a W, and also if we continue the whole pattern set a couple years where Ninjas got second place in 2020, and then in 2021 they won. Liquid got second place in 2021, so maybe if they do the same things that Ninjas did, then they'll go second place to first place in this event. Right, so I gave it to Liquid, right, winner, Liquid. And that's what I'm going with. I feel like that's the most predicted outcome, just from what I've seen scrolling through Twitter, Reddit, whatever. I think more people think Liquid than any other team to win, and probably Damwon, the second most voted team. But that's what I'm going with, and I mean, I'm fairly happy with this bracket. A few of these were really tough to pick, and I'm sure I'm going to feel super foolish on a bunch of these by the end, but That's what we're rocking with. If you have any strong opinions on any of these matters, I mean, let me know. Am I ridiculous for sending SSG or Sonics this far? Even, I mean, TSM for that matter. Am I underrating maybe Eminem, Navi, Nip, MIBR, whoever? Those are some of the teams. I feel like if any team I underrated, it was probably Eminem, Nip, or MIBR. And all right, this video is pretty long, and so I guess I'll have to call it quits now, right? With all that being said, coverage will continue soon. I will catch you in the next video.